Hi everybody, good evening. It is Amber Whitney with Archer Review here to bring you guys your anatomy and physiology crash course webinar for the evening. So I haven't done a webinar since before the holidays. I hope you guys are all doing well. The holidays allowed you time to rest, relax, rejuvenate, and your pre-nursing journey is back in full swing. And you're here tonight to elevate your anatomy and physiology skills just a bit with us at Archer Review. So I'm just really happy that you guys are all here. A few things about what we offer here at Archer Review before we officially begin content, and it gives people a minute to hop on. So I want to mention a couple of packages that are available to all of you here at Archer Review. To help you with your pre-nursing journey. But what I think is really special about Archer Review is not only do we offer these packages to help you in the pre-nursing route, you can continue to work with us here at Archer Review all the way through all of your nursing school into like passing your NCLEX. So I think that's a really special thing that we offer here. And so I just want to touch base on a couple of those at the pre-nursing level. So to get started, there are two different packages. The first one is called the Sure Pass. So that's going to be this top option referenced here in the visual. The Sure Pass option allows you full access to the question bank, not just a temporary free trial period. And we have an amazing question bank loaded with questions to help you prepare for that TEAS exam. But also you will have access to our on-demand videos. So each topic in our anatomy and physiology crash course we do tonight, we have in-depth videos or our on-demand videos available at Archer Review, and you would have access to all of those. So that's that top option, the Sure Pass option. But then if you want to elevate your purchase, you can get the Sure Pass Pro option. And here you would save a bit of money because not only would you have the full access to the question bank, and you would have full access to our on-demand videos, you would also get 1 full hour of tutoring support included with that purchase. So if you were to buy tutoring separate, let's say you looked at the Sure Pass and you decided, oh, I want an hour of tutoring, that would cost you a bit more money. Whereas if you did the Sure Pass Pro, you got that hour of tutoring included. And so again, it would save you money in the long run. So just something to think about if you are curious about more that we offer here at Archer Review. You're digging the webinars, they're helping you, your QBank access is great, but you're wanting full access and for a longer period of time. Check out the packages that we offer. So just a little bit more about what we offer here. We've got our free live webinars. So here's a QR code to access any of our free live webinars, all subjects covered. Not only do we have science, we've got math, we've got reading. And then if you've missed a webinar, you are able to rewatch our webinars, which I think is really amazing. So here's a QR code to be able to access the webinars that maybe you missed. So maybe you forgot one, maybe you already saw it, but you would like to go back and watch it again. Here's the QR code to access all previous webinars. Here's a link or the QR code to the free question bank. Again, I told you it was amazing, guys. We've got over 1,500 questions, and we're going through our questions very tediously, making sure everything is truly aligned to help you prepare for your TEAS exam. So please take advantage of that. And then those on-demand videos that I mentioned, here's that QR code there. So with our on-demand videos, I like to touch base on this a bit more because some of the topics we talk about tonight with our A&P crash course, it's very surface level. In fact, I should correct my statement. I should say every topic we go over in anatomy and phys tonight is very surface level, just simply because this is a free webinar. We cover a lot in only a 2-hour time span. I teach anatomy and phys during the day for my regular public education job, and this is a whole year-long course. So the fact that we're doing this in 2 hours is insane. But what I want to say is keep track of the topics that you feel you do really, really well in, and keep track of the topics that you feel like you need some improvement on. You need to go into greater detail, you need to review, whatever the reason may be, you need more. That would be a good place to go search those on-demand videos then. So again, purchasing that Sure Pass package, getting access to our on-demand videos. You can go to specific topics that you need that support, so more detail, more improvement. And within each on-demand video, we also have timestamps. So this means maybe in, the cardiovascular system, for example. You really do well with the structures of the cardiovascular system, but when it comes more to the physiology, so maybe it's the blood pressure, maybe it's heart contractions, that's where you need your support. You can use your timestamps and jump through the heart structures. You've got that. You don't need to waste your precious times that you need to study going over something you already feel really good about. Use those timestamps to kind of jump ahead and really cater to your needs as a learner. It allows all of this to be very individualized to help and support each and every one of you. So those are those on-demand videos. They're awesome. Please check those out. I'll talk more about tutoring at the end. I'll show you our tutors and give QR codes to each one of those, but just maybe take a screenshot of this page just so that you have the QR codes with you always, and you can go back and access those later. And speaking of screenshots and QR codes, one last thing before we start. I'm going to go ahead and give you access to the feedback survey QR code early, simply because if some of you have to hop off early, or given the fact that it's A&P and we go a little over time possibly, you just have this available. So the feedback survey is just an opportunity for you guys as learners, as consumers, to give us your honest feedback. What works well for you? What would you like to see us improve on so that we can improve what we offer to each one of you as our future nurses? So please, please, please take that opportunity at some point tonight to hop on and take that survey. I would so greatly appreciate that. All right, I'm just going to check the chat quick. I saw a couple of things pop up before we start. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and find time to respond to a couple of you individually. So I'm just saying that out loud so you know that I see your questions, and I will go ahead and respond to you in the chat personally. And that's a good prompt for me to remind everybody that in the chat room on Zoom, you are set up to where your questions or even your answers to our study questions tonight, as you share them in the chat, only I can see them. So I just want you to know, because for some people to share their answers, they want that to just be private between them and me, the instructor. So that is set up for you on Zoom for you to share your answers to tonight things privately. And then if you are on YouTube or if you are on Facebook, those responses in the chat will be public. So I just want to clarify the difference. Facebook and YouTube will be public comments, but here on Zoom, it is set up to only go between you and I. So I just want everyone to be aware of that before we start. All right, guys, let's go ahead and start with general knowledge. When it comes to general knowledge, we're speaking mostly about communication. It's a language that we're all going to be speaking together in the anatomy world. So all healthcare professionals need to speak a common language around anatomical position, using anatomical planes and directional terms. Because take a look at this visual here. You've got 3 different medical professionals all situated in a different orientation around a patient. So if someone were to say, pass this to the left. Well, who's left? Are we talking about the patient's left, your left? We need to be using terms that are understood through all orientations from all directions. And so we use anatomical position, planes, and directional terms to help us out there. So let's go ahead and start with anatomical position. Oops, I need to click through my arrows here. There we go. An anatomical position, it's a standard posture used. This means the individual is standing upright, their feet are together and they are parallel. Their arms are at their sides, and notice on the visual with the arms, look at those palms. The palms of the hand are facing forward. So your thumbs are actually pointing, I'm going to use the word lateral. We haven't quite talked about that term yet, but they're pointing towards like the outer parts of the body is pointing away from the body, and the head is directed straight ahead. The left and the right then are always from the patient's perspective. And the purpose here again is to ensure that medical professionals and researchers can accurately communicate findings without any kind of discrepancy or confusion. Why? So we can provide the best patient care, of course. All right, so with our, oops, I needed to use my arrows. Here we go. Our directional terms, you will find that directional terms are numerous. There are lots of them, and some of them are interchangeable, or they're synonyms. For example, the term anterior, which means the front of the body, could also be described by using the word ventral. So anterior and or ventral both mean front of the body. Posterior or dorsal means the back of the body. And I always help myself remember this because I think of a dolphin and their dorsal fin. And where that dorsal fin is placed on that dolphin is the back side of that dolphin's body. Superior or cranial means towards the head, which I think most of us are probably familiar with the term cranium, referring to the head. So cranial there kind of makes sense. And superior, just towards that cranial end, so towards the head. Inferior is the opposite then. Inferior or caudal means towards the feet. Medial means towards the midline of the body, whereas lateral means away from the midline of that body. So remember when I talked about anatomical position, looking at those palms and how they are faced, they're faced outwards. The thumbs are lateral. They're further away from the midline of the body compared to the other fingers. Proximal is going to refer to the point of attachment, and it's meaning closest to the point of attachment, whereas distal or distant, another word you can help connect there to help you remember the meaning, distal means farther from point of attachment. Anatomical planes, there are three major ones that we'll reference for tonight. Let's go ahead and start with frontal or coronal. So in this patient here, we see the frontal or coronal plane separating the front half of the patient's body from the back half. So see how this frontal or coronal plane separates the front half here from then the back half. The transverse plane separates the top half of the patient from the bottom half, or we could say the superior half from the inferior half. And then finally, the sagittal plane here. The sagittal plane is another vertical separation. It separates the patient's right half from the patient's left half. So three major anatomical planes that we can use to separate the patient's body. So using some common language so far, Let's go ahead and do our first check-in. So I want you to know with the TEAS and the time you've got to complete the science section and how many questions are just anatomy and physiology, the math really comes down to about you having 1 minute per question. So I'm going to keep that same structure set up for tonight's webinar. For every question that we do, you'll have 1 minute to break it down and answer. So for our first check-in, we've got 2 questions. So I'll give you 2 minutes, and I'll always try to read the questions out loud and then give you that 2 minutes time. So question 1 says, the sagittal plane separates the body into which halves? Question 2, which of the following correctly uses the term lateral? So I'll go ahead and give you 2 minutes starting now. All right, everybody, welcome back. That was 2 minutes. Let's go ahead and break down our 2 questions. Question 1 says the sagittal plane separates the body into, these are the left and right half, the upper and lower halves, front and back halves, or equal halves. The correct answer here is left and right halves. All right, so the sagittal plane is a vertical plane going right down the midline of the patient's body. So that would leave that patient's body separated into the right and left halves. Option B, the lower and upper, is incorrect. This would be a transverse plane. Option C is incorrect because the front and the back halves would be the frontal plane. And option D, equal halves, is not specific enough. Equal in which direction? It's not giving you enough information there, so you can rule out D. Question 2, which of the following correctly uses the term lateral? Remember, lateral means away from the midline of the body. The correct answer is C. The eyes are lateral to the nose. The eyes are farther away from the midline of the body than compared to the nose. The eyes are outside, away from the midline of the nose, because the nose is situated right on that midline. So option A is incorrect because the nose is in between the eyes, or the nose is medial to the eyes. Option B, the mouth is lateral to the neck, is also incorrect. The mouth is a pretty medial structure and the neck is inferior to the mouth. And then option D is also incorrect. In anatomical position, remember your palms are up, and so your pinkies are going to be medial to the thumb. The pinky is going to be closest to the midline of the body compared to the thumb. All right, moving on to anatomical regions. This section is a little brief simply because anatomical regions is, oh man, it's numerous, you guys. So in anatomical regions, you can see that there are 6 major portions of the body. We've got the head, we've got the neck, and how many different regions within just the head and the neck. Okay, we've got the upper limbs. So these are going to be like your arm extremities. We've got your torso, the front half, the back half, or we could say anterior and posterior, now that we're using anatomical terms. We've got your pelvis and we've got the lower limbs. And again, just looking at each major body region, there are other regions listed on each one. So anatomical regions are numerous, you guys. Mostly this would be language that you pick up in like a medical terminology class, but I'm referencing it simply because we rely on anatomical regions to talk about other body systems, to talk about other sections within anatomy. When we talk about muscles, for example, muscles are going to be named partially based off of their location, and their location is an anatomical region. So you just have to know that language. And I tell my students all the time, it's pretty much just drilling in and memorizing. So creating flashcards, having pictures, and going over these as many times for little chunks of times throughout your day so that it eventually sticks. Okay, that wraps up general knowledge. We'll keep trying to use our anatomical terms and planes, directional terms, regions throughout the rest of our night together. So let's go ahead and move into the respiratory system. And remember, this is a crash course tonight. It goes kind of quick. I know this, but just keep in the back of your mind, we offer more support for you as a learner. All right. So check out all that we have to offer you at Archer Review. We go into each one of these areas in greater detail if you should need it. And I would assume you would. So let's go ahead and move into the respiratory system. So in order to do the respiratory system, I want all of you to go ahead and take a deep breath in with me. Feel your breath travel in either through your nose or through your mouth, and feel it fill down into your chest. And then when you're ready, go ahead and exhale that breath out. But I want you to take that breath because I want to talk about the passageway, the flow of that breath as it travels through your respiratory system. So as you're taking that breath in, again, you're either a nose breather or maybe a mouth breather if you're a little sick right now. And as that air passes into either your nose or your mouth, it will eventually reach the back part of your mouth or your nasal cavity, where we would call the pharynx, okay? The pharynx. And again, there's 3 arrows here because the pharynx can be broken down into further structures. This would be stuff we would talk about more in detail on our on-demand videos. But to keep it simple, we're just going to call it the pharynx for now. So it passes back into the pharynx, and as we move inferior, we're now moving into the larynx, okay? So the pharynx is going to just allow air to come in and to eventually enter that respiratory system, whereas now the larynx is going to help keep any kind of food or drink out of the trachea where we want that air to go. So notice how the larynx here is going to be situated by not only like your windpipe where your air is going to come into, but also this other tube back here called your esophagus, which we'll talk about in the digestive system. So actually your food, your drink, the air that comes in with that, it's all mixed at first, and your larynx helps to make sure that the food and the drink you bring in with your air sometimes, it goes down a separate passageway than the air itself. We want to make sure the air goes down into this next structure here called the trachea. The trachea is this cream-colored tube, also known as your windpipe. And see how it's got these rings on it? That's because your trachea is made up of cartilage. And once that air travels down through your trachea, it can go either to the patient's right or the patient's left. This structure right here, dividing right versus left, is called the bronchi. Okay. And then after the bronchi, so it's either going to go to the patient's right side or the patient's left side. Once it leaves the bronchi, it just gets subdivided even more into smaller tubules, and these are called bronchioles. Now, these bronchioles, all of these channels or tubes here, will eventually reach like an end cap, and they're kind of like a cul-de-sac look. We'll see another visual of it on another slide, but it eventually reaches what we call the alveoli. These, oh, here's a visual right here in front of me. My goodness. These like cul-de-sacs, these clusters of grapes almost, these are the alveoli. And the alveoli, this is the site for gas exchange. Everything else leading up to alveoli is just simply a passageway. It's just directing the air so that it eventually gets to the alveoli. But here at the alveoli, this is where the magic happens. This is where gas is exchanged. And we'll talk about those gases here in just a couple of slides. But just to recap, as you take a breath in, that air travels in through your nose or through your mouth, hits the pharynx, travels through your larynx, ensures it goes down into your trachea. The trachea hits the bronchi, where it hits either the patient's right or left, gets subdivided into bronchioles until that air can be delivered to the alveoli, the site for gas exchange. Let's do a moment to check in on that structure and function connection. Well, just structure, I should say. What is the correct pathway of air exiting the respiratory system? So we went through the structures as air entering. Let's see if you can go in the reverse order as you exhale. All right, I'll give you 1 minute to think this one through. All right, everyone, that minute sure does go by fast. I've got a question in the chat that says, where do you want us to put the answers? Go ahead and feel free to type it right here in your chat. Again, remember the chats that pop up here tonight should be private. So if you want to go ahead and share your answer, but you don't want everyone to see your answer, it's okay. I'm the only one that's able to see it. And I do like that you guys share your answers because it gives me some good feedback on some comprehension, or maybe if I word a question poorly sometimes. I do appreciate you guys participating. All right, let's break this one down. What is the correct pathway of air exiting the respiratory system? All right, so your correct answer here is C. All right, so a lot of you, I was seeing, you chose a correct pathway when it comes to air entering the respiratory system, but this question is asking you to go in the reverse order, exiting the respiratory system. So remember, the alveoli are those clusters at the very end. It's like a terminal stopping point. That's the site for gas exchange. Now work your way backwards. So connected to the alveoli are those tubules called the bronchioles, which connect to the bronchi that separates either from the patient's right or left lung. Then the bronchi connect into the trachea, which is your windpipe. The trachea then connects into the larynx, which connects to the pharynx, and then eventually fully exhaling that air either out through your nose or your mouth. All right, let's connect back to some physiology, some of the function here. So we said the alveoli is the site for gas exchange. So what is that exchange of gases? So really gas exchange depends on this process called diffusion. Diffusion of gases in actually two directions. So the two directions is this. You've got oxygen being inhaled. Okay, so oxygen is incoming. It's being delivered to the alveoli in these blood vessels here. And that oxygen, since it's highly concentrated in this blood vessel, and since probably you just exhaled, it's not as concentrated inside the alveoli, that air sac. Oxygen will naturally cross this membrane and diffuse into the alveoli, because diffusion is the movement of any kind of particle, but in this case gas, oxygen, from a high concentration into an area of low concentration. Okay, so as you exhale out, you're low on oxygen, but as soon as you take a good breath in, you're loading your blood up with oxygen once more. And so all that blood surrounding those alveoli take that oxygen from the blood vessel and it goes into the alveoli. That's diffusion. But then there's an exchange happening, right? If you take in oxygen, what's being exchanged? Well, what's being exchanged is carbon dioxide. And this is waste from cellular respiration occurring. And cellular respiration is the cellular process through which your body produces ATP, which gets used for energy. So carbon dioxide is a waste. It gets built up inside of your blood, okay, because it's coming from all different cells of your body. And this blood is highly concentrated in carbon dioxide and it's low concentrated inside the alveoli. So which direction does carbon dioxide move? It will diffuse out of the blood, across this membrane and into the alveoli so that you can exhale and get carbon dioxide officially out of your body, since it is a waste product after all. All right, let's take a moment to check in on that physiology piece. Question 1 says the body exchanges what gases in the lungs? And question 2 says what structure is the site for gas exchange? And again, you've got 2 questions, so I'm going to go ahead and give you 2 minutes, which starts now. All right, everybody, welcome back. That's your 2 minutes, and I am seeing wonderful responses from you all participating in the chat. I don't see a single wrong answer so far, so good job to all of you out there paying attention. Let's break it down. Let's talk about it. The first question says the body exchanges what gases in the lungs? So what are you taking into your body? What are you exhaling for that cellular respiration component? Hopefully this was an easy one for you all. The correct answer here is C, oxygen and carbon dioxide. I'll go ahead and switch to the next slide so you can catch that right answer. So option C, like I said, oxygen and carbon dioxide. So let's take a moment to rule out the others. When it comes to option A, carbon dioxide is correct, but it's the nitrogen component that's incorrect. Technically, we do inhale nitrogen. That's just a component that's in our air. But since nitrogen isn't something that's going to be actively reacting with the cellular respiration, it's not the gas that's being exchanged. It's just exhaled back out. So you inhale it in, you exhale it back out. It's not being exchanged for a purpose. So nitrogen is ruled out, which rules out A. Option B, oxygen is correct, but again, there's nitrogen again, so rule out B. C is correct. Oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged for the purpose of cellular respiration. And then option D, we do inhale some trace amounts of hydrogen, but again, since it's not an active or an active reactant, I should say, it's exhaled right back out as well. Option 2, or question 2, what structure is the site for gas exchange? So out of all of these, alveoli, bronchi, trachea, bronchioles, 3 of them are just passageways. Oh goodness, I've got my A, B, C, D mixed up. Option, I guess, B here, out of order. Good job to all of you in the chat who referenced that correctly. Option B, alveoli, is the correct site for gas exchange. Remember, that's those terminal ends connected to the bronchioles. And they're bubble shaped, they're cluster shaped, and in order to increase that surface area for mass gas exchange. All of these other structures are tubules. And they're necessary because it helps deliver the air that you bring into your body to the alveoli, but they're just passageways. The alveoli is the site for gas exchange. Respiratory system cause and effect. So I just want to take a moment to connect to other body systems, because without other body systems, the respiratory system wouldn't be able to function, and vice versa. The respiratory system has a wonderful contribution, an essential contribution to other body systems as well. But just one I want to touch base on is the cardiovascular system, simply because we talked about that blood supply. So the respiratory system depends on that blood supply right alongside of those alveoli air sacs so that gases can diffuse in and gases can diffuse out. Without the cardiovascular system providing that blood supply, we would not have gas exchange. All right, that wraps up the respiratory system. Let's quickly review the main ideas. The respiratory system's role is to regulate gas exchange. It inhales oxygen for cellular respiration, and it exhales out that carbon dioxide waste. The respiratory system is made up of the following structures following inhaling breaths. Okay, so we're going to take a deep breath in. It's going to follow that pathway. So remember, it hits the pharynx, then the larynx, down through your trachea or the windpipe, to the bronchi, where it goes either through the patient's left or the patient's right, and into the bronchioles until it finally reaches the alveoli. And the respiratory system highly depends on and affects other organ systems, but we touched base on the cardiovascular system tonight. So speaking of the cardiovascular system, that's what's up next, of course. So just another quick reminder, this does go fast. Check out our on-demand videos and timestamps, okay? So keep track of what topics tonight you do well on, what topics tonight you need more opportunities for improvement on, and check out those on-demand videos to get that support. Or sign up for a tutoring session, of course. That would be also wonderful for you. All right, so with the cardiovascular system, its role is to transport waste, to transport hormones, nutrients, antibodies, you name it. Whatever your body needs or needs to get rid of, it's going to travel probably through the cardiovascular system. So all of those blood vessels and your heart. So your cardiovascular system is a closed system. All right, and that closed system has a pump. So at the heart, notice my pun there, no pun intended, I should say, at the heart of the circulatory system, you've got a pump, which allows for everything to be able to travel through those closed systems because the heart is able to create pressure, and the pressure induces the flow of blood, which allows you to transport the waste, the hormones, the nutrients, the antibodies. So there are two different circulations within the cardiovascular system. One circulatory type is the systemic circulation. Another circulation type is the pulmonary circulation, and we will definitely touch more on those in the next couple of slides. I'm just referencing the two here. So the two different circulations on the patient's right side of the heart is going to be that pulmonary piece. On the patient's left, the patient's left side of the heart here, we're going to have the systemic piece. Now, your heart, being that pump, is going to be made up of two atria and two ventricles. We have a four-chambered heart. And fun fact, not all living things that have a heart have a four-chambered heart. Okay, humans have four-chambered. It allows for us to have two completely separate flows of blood so that we are not mixing deoxygenated blood with oxygenated blood. Having the four-chambered heart allows us to maximize efficiency of our oxygen, our gases. Now, connected to your heart, that pump, are vessels. Arteries are going to carry blood away from the heart. Veins are going to carry blood towards the heart. And there's a whole bunch of capillaries throughout your body, which are the smallest of the vessels that are going to make connections in between. Let's go ahead and start with pulmonary circulation, just normal pulmonary circulation. This is going to occur primarily on the patient's right side of their heart, okay, the patient's right side of their heart. And the goal for pulmonary circulation is to get oxygenated, to get rich in oxygen. So think about the structure that we've already talked about that provides oxygen. It's your lungs. And the root word in medical terminology, pulm, means lung. So the blood traveling through pulmonary circulation is going to ultimately travel to the lungs so that that blood can get rich on oxygen and then be delivered to the rest of the body, which is the other circulation type that we'll talk about. But let's break down the structures and the flow of that blood in order to get to the lungs. So blood is going to be coming back from the body, meaning it's low on oxygen. It will enter into the patient's heart through two different places, either the superior vena cava, so blood coming from the upper half of the patient's body, the superior half, or it will enter in through the inferior vena cava, the patient's lower portion of their body. But both vena cavas will dump into the patient's right atrium. The right atrium is then going to connect to the ventricle, but first, or separating this atrium from the ventricle, is a valve. So this blood from the right atrium has to pass through this valve called the tricuspid valve. And this valve is here to ensure blood flows in the right direction. Okay, valves are like gatekeepers. So we're going to see quite a few of them. On the patient's right side, though, is the tricuspid valve. I always emphasize the "ri" part of tricuspid because that helps me and my students remember that's the right side. So tricuspid is on the right side of the patient's heart. So the blood flows through the tricuspid valve and it pools down into the right ventricle. Then the blood will flow through this valve, the pulmonary semilunar valve. And again, it's pulmonary because this blood is eventually going to the lungs. So this is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Once it passes through this semilunar valve, it will flow through the pulmonary artery until it connects to the lungs itself. where it will get rich in oxygen. So that's pulmonary circulation. Its job is to get rich in oxygen, so it's got to go to the lungs. And it does so by passing through the patient's right side of their heart. But then, once the blood is loaded up on oxygen from the lungs, it now needs to be delivered to the body. And that heart, being the pump for that transportation mechanism, is going to allow for that blood to enter and pass through so it can get to the body. So let's break down the structures and the flow of that blood in order to do so. So you have got pulmonary veins. Remember, the veins are going to deliver the blood towards the heart. Arteries go away, veins come towards. And we're in the lungs, we need to go towards the heart. And you have a right lung and a left lung. So you will have a set of veins on both sides of the patient. You will have pulmonary veins on the patient's right and the patient's left. But both set of veins will connect and dump into the left atrium. So blood flows into the left atrium. It will pass through another valve called either the mitral valve or can be known as the bicuspid valve. Mitral or bicuspid, those are interchangeable. It will pass through the mitral or bicuspid valve until that blood flows down into the left ventricle. The blood will leave the left ventricle through a heart contraction and be squeezed through the aortic semilunar valve. So this semilunar valve being called aortic means the blood's going to be delivered to the aorta. The aorta is a major artery, which means that it's going to deliver blood away from the heart, but the aorta will deliver blood away from the heart to the body. Okay, so oxygen-rich blood being delivered away from the heart towards the rest of the body. And this is called systemic circulation because you hear the word system. Think of the system we're referencing here is the body. We're delivering oxygen-rich blood to the body or your system. All right, your first set of questions for cardiovascular system, you guys. Question 1, the left atrium receives blood from the what structure? And question 2, which of the following is a part of the systemic circulation? You've got 2 questions, so you've got 2 minutes starting now. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and check in on how you guys did. Question 1, the left atrium receives blood from so the patient's left side. Remember, the left side is going to be the systemic circulation. Okay, so it's coming from the lungs. That means it's going to pool into or be delivered into the left atrium by the pulmonary veins. Okay, veins go towards the heart. So option A, the left ventricle, is incorrect because the left ventricle is inferior to the atria. So the atrium does not receive the blood from the ventricle. The ventricle being inferior to the atrium is not delivering blood to the atrium. The vena cavas are going to deliver blood to the patient's right atrium. And then option C, the pulmonary artery, sends blood away from the heart and to the lungs. It's never going to deliver blood to the left atrium. So your correct option here is D, the pulmonary veins. Question 2. Which of the following is a part of the pulmonary circulation? So out of all these structures, which part is the pulmonary circulation? And the answer here is going to be the I think I circled the correct, or the, oh goodness, I don't know if I aligned that correctly there. So which of the following structure is a part of the systemic circulation? So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We've got your pulmonary veins coming in. We've got your left atrium. We've got the mitral valve. We've got your left ventricle. We've got the aortic semilunar valve there, and then eventually going to the aorta for systemic. And then when we look at pulmonary circulation, we've got the superior and inferior vena cavas. We've got the patient's right atrium. We've got the tricuspid valve. We've got the right ventricle going into the pulmonary semilunar valve to eventually go to the pulmonary artery and get to the lungs. So reviewing those structures, when we ask which of the following is a part of systemic circulation, remember we're talking about the circulation that is going to deliver blood to the body, okay? So when we look at our visual, that is going to occur on the patient's left side of the body, or of the left side of the heart there. Trying to get back to the, okay. So on the patient's left side, none of these options there are apparently going to work except for the aortic semilunar valve. Okay, I did have that marked correctly. Sorry guys, I thought I messed up there, but I'm switching through my slides and I think it is highlighted on the correct one. So with the aortic semilunar valve, we've got the valve connecting to the aorta, and the aorta delivers the oxygen-rich blood away from the heart and to the rest of the body or the system. Okay, so the aortic semilunar valve here, I did highlight correctly, my goodness. So option D for number 1, and then option A for number 2, which a lot of you chose. So good job for those who participated in the chat. So your cardiovascular system is, oh, I've got a question here in the chat for a second. Is systemic circulation for deoxygenated? Systemic circulation, remember, system means body. So circulation of blood that needs to go to the body. This means that blood is going to be rich in oxygen, okay? So not deoxygenated, that's poorly oxygenated blood. That is pulmonary circulation. That blood's got to go to the lungs to get rich in oxygen. Okay, so systemic, go back to our visual here. Systemic is going to come from the lungs. It's going to be rich in oxygen. Okay, so not deoxygenated, it will be rich in oxygen, and it will be delivered to the rest of the body. Okay, so I hope I clarified that question for you in the chat, and thanks for asking it. And I answer it out loud because someone else may have that same question, so thank you for asking it. All right, guys, if the cardiovascular system is transporting blood, let's take a moment to talk about the components that are found within the blood. So the components found in your blood are going to be the red blood cells, platelets, plasma, and white blood cells. Let's take a moment to talk about each one. The red blood cells are going to contain hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is going to bind to oxygen so we can deliver that oxygen to all cells for cellular respiration. And in return, it will take some carbon dioxide waste to the lungs to be exhaled. Notice not all carbon dioxide is going to be exhaled from the lungs. It will take some carbon dioxide to the lungs. Your blood is also going to be made up of platelets, which are going to play a major role in blood clotting. And the blood will have plasma. Plasma is going to be essential and hold nutrients, proteins that are necessary for your immune system, hormones, and antibodies. And your blood will contain white blood cells, which helps to fight off pathogens. So you got a mixture of 4 major components making up your blood. And if any one of you has ever donated plasma, you've probably seen the centrifuge. Once they've got your blood, they run it through a centrifuge and they kind of separate your blood into these major components so that they can take and harvest that plasma and they give you back your red blood cells. All right, but since your cardiovascular system is a closed system and your heart is that central pump, that means that the pressure that is experienced within that cardiovascular system or the circulatory system is due to the fact that it's a closed system. Okay, so when your heart changes its size or volume through contractions, it alters the blood pressure. But what controls the heart contractions then? It's a great question. You've got your own natural pacemaker. So this node right here in the patient's right atrium is called the sinoatrial node, or we also call it the SA node. Blood pressure is controlled by the SA node simply because the SA node controls heart contractions. So this is your natural pacemaker right here. So if a patient's SA node is not working properly, a patient might need to have a pacemaker put in to control that electrical current in order to control heart contractions and maintain blood pressure. But that SA node is your natural pacemaker. So you've got 2 different contractions that actually your heart experiences. You've got the ventricles that will contract, so those bottom chambers. And you've got your atrias that will contract, which are those top chambers. When each one of those set of chambers contract, it will make a sound. Okay, so when ventricles contract, we call that the lub sound. And when your atria contract, we call that the dub sound. So you've got this back and forth lub dub, lub dub, lub dub sound. And that's your heart beating. And we can hear that. We can measure that. And that's how we record someone's blood pressure. So we're actually measuring the contraction phase, which we call systole, compared to the relaxed phase, which we call diastole. So we're just measuring how many units of pressure there are when the heart contracts versus how many units of pressure there are when the heart relaxes and fills back up with blood. And for those of you that pay attention to your blood pressure, you remember that normal range should be about 120/80. All right, let's check in quick. If a person is experiencing backflow of blood from their right ventricle into their right atrium, what structure is not functioning correctly? Go ahead and give yourself 1 minute to work this one out. Okay, if a patient is experiencing backflow of blood from their right ventricle back into their right atrium, again, not the correct flow, it is backflowing. What structure is not functioning correctly? Remember that we said the structures that control the flow of blood are valves. These are gatekeepers. They ensure the flow of blood in the proper direction. Okay, so we're looking for a valve, but then we're also focused on the patient's right side. And on the right side, we call that valve between the right atrium and the right ventricle the tricuspid valve. So great job to those who chose option D. The tricuspid valve is the valve separating the patient's right side atrium from the right side ventricle. Okay, let's rule out why the other options aren't correct. Atrioventricular node is too general, okay? And it's a node. We're looking for a valve. The valve we're looking for is an atrioventricular valve. It separates the atrium from the ventricle, okay? But it's not the atrioventricular node. That's a separate structure altogether, and it's actually a part of the electrical system that helps your heart contract. The mitral valve is an AV valve, but this is found on the patient's left side. And the sinoatrial node, again, not a valve, but the sinoatrial node is that natural pacemaker found within the patient's right atrium. Tricuspid valve is the only correct option and logical choice here. Let's recap cardiovascular system. The heart is four-chambered. It's a closed pump. It circulates blood for taking in nutrients and oxygen, and it delivers clotting proteins, removes waste from through plasma. It's got red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets. The pulmonary circulation delivers oxygen, depleted blood to the lungs to get rich in oxygen. The systemic circulation delivers oxygenated blood to the rest of the body. Blood circulates with a known force, which we call pressure, since it is a closed system. The heart is that muscle that's contracting, ensuring the flow of blood and maintaining that pressure. And the heart muscle contraction we can measure. It is the contraction phase compared to the relaxation phase, or systole compared to diastole. And those contractions are all controlled by the SA or sinoatrial node, which is your natural pacemaker. All right, we're going to move into the digestive system. And again, I could go into each one of these in such great detail, and maybe I'm doing that a little too much because it's already 7 o'clock, okay? We've got 12 total sections to get through, and we are on 4. So we're going to pick up the pace just a little bit. Again, if this is too fast for you at times, I understand. Check out our on-demand videos, visit our question bank, seek out tutors, do what you need to improve your learning, but this is just a little surface, scratching the surface and just getting a feel for what we have to offer for you all at Archer Review. Let's go ahead and start digestive. Digestion means it's the process by which your body breaks down food and drink into smaller molecules so that all of those goodies that you nourish your body with can be absorbed into your bloodstream and used by your body, whether that's for energy, for growth, or for repair. Digestion can take on 2 different ways, or can be done in 2 different ways, can take on 2 different forms. Mechanical digestion versus chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion, I like to think of it as like a physical change that you would learn in a general science class. So we're just physically breaking down the food. We're not altering its composition. We're simply just making it smaller, changing its form. And that begins in the mouth, but it also continues in the stomach because of muscle contractions. The purpose for mechanical digestion is to increase surface area so that we can maximize everything that we can absorb from that food. On the other side then is chemical digestion. It's like a chemical change. Okay, so we are altering the food composition. We're completely chemically breaking it down, changing its form. And that begins also in the mouth with the use of your saliva. Your saliva is going to house or hold enzymes that help to break down that food chemically as soon as it enters your mouth. But as it enters your mouth and mechanical and chemical digestion occurs, it's going to be passed from your mouth into other structures as you swallow. So let's talk our way through the correct pathway of the digestive system as if we were swallowing some food right now or taking a drink of water. So after the mouth and you swallow, that food or drink enters into the esophagus. Okay, the esophagus is a tube that carries your contents from your mouth or from your throat, and it delivers it to your stomach. The stomach is a muscle, and it's going to further break down that food from using muscle contractions and chemicals. Once it leaves the stomach, it will enter into the small intestine. And the small intestine connects to that stomach, and the small intestine will connect to the large intestine. But the major role for your small intestine is to absorb nutrients. It will play a small part in digestion of food simply because it connects to other accessory organs, but its main role is to absorb nutrients. Then the food passes from the small intestine into the large intestine, and here the water will be absorbed. So any kind of chyme mixture that's entering into your large intestine, the water is the next thing to be absorbed here. And that's what leads your waste to be solid most times, right? So your solid waste will be stored in the next structure called the rectum until you are able to release it, through which it will pass through the anus. And that's the structure that will allow the waste to officially exit out of the body. All right, 2 questions. Our first question is, what is the main function of the small intestine? And question 2 is, what structure connects the mouth to the stomach? I'll go ahead and give you 2 minutes starting now. All right, guys, welcome back. Question number 1, what is the main function of the small intestine? The main function of the small intestine is to absorb nutrients. Okay, so option B. What structure connects the mouth to the stomach? And that's going to be option A, the esophagus. So I'll switch slides here so you've got the answers in front of you. Let's talk about why the other options are not correct. So the main function of the small intestine is to absorb nutrients. It's not the chemical breakdown of food. It will partake in some chemical digestion, okay? There are accessory organs involved that connect into the small intestine, but the main role, the main function is absorbing nutrients. Absorbing water is the role of the large intestine, and the storage of waste is going to be the role of your rectum. Question 2, what structure connects the mouth to the stomach? This is the esophagus, is that long tube connecting both structures. The small intestine is going to connect the stomach to the large intestine. The large intestine connects the small intestine to the rectum. And the anus is that last structure where your waste exits out of your body. So recapping the digestive system. It's a system that breaks down and absorbs nutrients and water for growth, repair, and energy production. Digestion can be chemical, but it can also be mechanical. The food passes through the digestive system as follows. Mouth, then into the esophagus, into the stomach, then the small intestine, followed by the large intestine. The waste is stored in the rectum, and it's released through the anus. All right, next up is the nervous system. Just a reminder, and I've got a question about this. This webinar is technically supposed to be over at 8 o'clock. We might go a little over, so if you are able to stay, that's absolutely okay. I'll be here. We'll finish it up no matter what time we end. But if you also have to leave early too, that's not a problem at all. You do what you need to. I'm just giving you a heads up so you can kind of plan. All right, the nervous system. Let's go ahead and begin with a general overview first. The nervous system is primarily made up of the brain, your spinal cord, and nerves. The function for your nervous system is to help all parts of the body communicate with one another. I mean, we're talking about all these other different systems, like the cardiovascular system, the digestive system, the respiratory system, and we've got more that we're going to cover. And we're learning that these systems are interdependent on each other. Well, to be dependent on one another means you have to communicate. And so the nervous system is the system through which all of the other parts of your body do that communication. So the nervous system will receive information. It determines where that information needs to be sent. And then it allows the body to respond properly to those signals. All of this helps to maintain homeostasis, or this internal balance or stability or regulation. All of those words mean the same thing, which is homeostasis. The nervous system, though, can be broken down beyond just, your brain, your spinal cord, your nerves, into two major systems, two major structures, okay? So the central nervous system is going to be made up of your brain and your spinal cord. And the central nervous system, housing your brain and your spinal cord, is that central command system. Think of it as the main operation, okay? It's that central command system. And the other part of your nervous system we call the peripheral nervous system. Maybe you've heard of the term peripheral, like in your peripheral vision. Okay, so it's like the outer part of your vision. So think of peripheral like the outer parts of your body instead of that central nervous system, your brain and your spinal cord. The peripheral nervous system is all of those branching nerves, and they connect to that spinal cord and they connect to your brain, but these nerves branch outward or laterally, okay, away from the midline to all other parts of your body. At the basis of every nervous system component is what we would call a neuron, okay? So a neuron is a cluster of nerve cells that communicate information. So these neurons send information and they also receive information. So a neuron is going to be the basic unit, a cluster of nerve cells in either your central nervous system or your peripheral nervous system. So looking at a neuron, there are different parts, and each one of these structures have their own job. So a neuron has a cell body. Okay, so the cell body is going to be labeled number 1 here on our visual. The cell body is going to contain organelles, and it's going to contain the nucleus of the neuron. Around the cell body are these fibers that we call dendrites. And these dendrites carry the information from that surrounding environment. So it senses that signals or chemicals, for example, and it sends that information towards the cell body. Next up then is the axon. So that cell body will receive the signal, it determines what to do with that signal, and it passes that signal down the rest of the length of that neuron. And this major length of a neuron is called the axon. That axon, again, carries information away from the cell body area towards the other end of that neuron, where it will reach the axon terminals. And the axon terminals will transmit information, or that signal, from this neuron to a neighboring neuron. It's like one big giant game of telephone, where one signal is passed from one neuron to the next. But let's not forget about structure number 5. This is called the myelin sheath. And this myelin sheath is going to wrap around the axon to insulate it and to protect it. Since the axon has a major role of carrying the signal away from one end of the neuron towards the other end so that it can communicate with other cells, this structure is crucial. It's essential. And so there's an extra layer of protection and insulation around that axon, and we call that the myelin sheath. And that's that lighter green structure here that wraps around that long strand of axon material. Okay, let's check in on the nervous system learning so far. Question 1, what structure carries signals to the body and back to the brain? Question 2, what structure of a neuron protects and insulates the length of the axon? It's 2 questions, so you've got 2 minutes. Good luck. All right, our 2 minutes has come to an end. So question number 1, what structure carries signals to the body and then back to the brain? So these are signals that are going to leave the brain, go all the way to the body, but then send that signal back to the brain. So here we're talking specifically about the peripheral nervous system. Remember, the peripheral nervous system is going to be those branching nerves. It's going to go away from the midline, away from the brain and the spinal cord to the body. So the peripheral nervous system is the correct answer for option 1. The command center is part that we would call the central nervous system. So that's the function, that's the job of the central nervous system. It's the local command center, but it's not actually delivering the signals to the rest of the body. So we can rule A out. Muscle contraction is a specific signal that could be sent to the body and then back to the brain, but it's not the structure that carries that actual signal. And then option D, the central nervous system, this is synonymous with the command center. Question 2, what structure of a neuron protects and insulates the length of an axon? So the correct answer here, as you see, is the myelin sheath. Remember, the myelin sheath is going to insulate, protect, wrap around that axon. That rules out A. The axon does not protect and insulate itself. It relies on another structure to do that. Option B, the axon terminal is going to relay signals or information from one neuron to the next. It connects to the axon, but its job is not to protect and insulate the axon. And option D, the cell body, we can also rule out the cell body will connect to the axon. The cell body holds the organelles and it holds the nucleus of the cell, but it does not insulate and it does not protect the axon. All right, so generally, just looking at how a neuron communicates with a neighboring neuron, here's a simple 5-step breakdown of how that information is received and then sent off to the next neighboring neuron. So the electrical signal is received by the dendrites, okay? So when we are looking at, like, this goes from yellow to blue. Yes, it does. Okay, so let's start with the yellow neuron here. Here are the dendrites. The dendrites are going to pick up a signal from the surrounding environment. Okay, and if that signal is strong enough for that neuron to say, hey, we got to do something with this information, this is high priority, it will send that signal down the length of that axon until it hits the axon terminals. Once it hits the axon terminals, now we're going to zoom in here at this connection spot where the axon terminals connect with, get close to, the dendrites of a neighboring neuron. So let's zoom in. That's the visual down here. So in this axon terminal end, notice how there are these neurotransmitter packets. These neurotransmitter packets are released, and then these signals here will do what we call jump the gap. Since the axon terminal doesn't actually touch or butt right up next to the dendrite of the neighboring neuron, that means that this signal, and here specifically is in the form of like a chemical signal, has to jump the gap. It's got to be released from one end and jump the gap and connect or be received to the neighboring neuron. And once that signal is received, it will bind to that neighboring neuron, where that cell will then continue to be passed down that neuron's axon, and then jump the next gap and go to the next neuron until it finally reaches the destination in the body. That signal is finally delivered. Maybe it's to your hands right now as you're taking notes, right? Your muscles, your bones, they're communicating with each other. They're contracting, they're relaxing, maybe even hand cramping right now if you're handwriting all of this anyway. So, but eventually all of those signals, what I'm getting at is all the signals reaching your fingers right now, whether it's your bone, whether it's your muscle for movement, is coming from the brain. Well, it has to go from one neuron to the next, and it just sends that signal until it finally reaches that destination. Let's review the nervous system. It's made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and nerves. It's divided between either the central nervous system, making up brain and spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which is the nerves. A neuron, which is the basic unit of the nervous system, it's a nervous system cell. It's made up of the cell body, dendrites, an axon terminal, and a myelin sheath. The neurons are used to send, receive electrical signals in order to communicate from one neuron to another, for one part of the body to connect with another part of the body, all to maintain homeostasis. All right, moving right into the muscular system then. Here we go. The muscles that you can find in your body are of 3 different variations. So you can have smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or skeletal muscle. Smooth muscle we would consider to be involuntary, meaning you don't have complete control over it. We would find smooth muscle in hollow organs, so mostly found in your digestive system. But smooth muscle, if we look at it under a microscope, there are some characteristics that help you identify smooth muscle compared to other muscle types. Smooth muscle is not striated, meaning that there are no visible sarcomeres for muscle contraction. Instead, when you look at the muscle cells, the muscle tissue, the appearance is rather uniform because the proteins are kind of arranged irregularly. We'll talk more on this later, as opposed to some of these other muscle types where you can see those striations on them. Smooth muscle has a smooth look. You're not going to see those striations. Cardiac muscle is unique because it's only found in the heart. The cardiac muscle is also involuntary. Thank goodness we don't control it. Think of how distracted you get with everything else in your life. If you forgot to think for a second about, oh, got to keep my heart beating, we would all not be here, unfortunately. So the cardiac muscle is involuntary. It controls itself. And remember, it controls the heart contractions by that sinoatrial node, your natural pacemaker. Cardiac muscle tissue is branched and it is striated, meaning it's got those visible striations on them. So there are sarcomeres that are visible. Again, we'll talk about sarcomeres here in just a minute. And then our last muscle type is skeletal. Skeletal is mostly voluntary. You get to control, you get to flex, you get to relax, you control your body's movement. You have choice. Skeletal muscle is also striated, meaning that you can see those visible sarcomeres here. And skeletal muscle is often attached to bone, okay? And that's what's going to allow our skeletal muscle to give us movement. Okay, let's take a moment to distinguish between our muscle types. Here's our question. What muscle type would be involved in the muscle contractions of the stomach, allowing you to mechanically digest food and drink into nutrients that are necessary for life? Is that your cardiac muscle, your skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, or striated muscle? I'll give you 1 minute. All right, everybody, I am seeing all kinds of correct answers for this question. Good job to those people who are sharing your answers and your feedback. You guys have got it correct. So, the muscle type involved in muscle contractions of the stomach is the role of smooth muscle. Remember, smooth muscle is going to be found primarily in your digestive system. It makes up your hollow organs, which is your stomach after all. But let's rule out the others quickly. So cardiac muscle is heart muscle only, so we can rule that out. Heart is not your stomach, so no cardiac muscle found in your stomach. Option B, skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle connects bone to the muscle itself, so it's going to create movement that is not necessarily the job of your stomach. Your job of the stomach is to digest your food through muscle contractions. So that's why C is correct. But then striated muscle is incorrect because striated muscle, those types of striated muscle are cardiac and skeletal. Remember, smooth muscle is not striated. You don't see those stripes because we don't see uniform sarcomeres there. So striated muscle goes along with cardiac and skeletal, which we've already ruled out. So an overview of your skeletal muscles. And that's going to be the focus of the rest of this section, by the way, your skeletal muscle. So there are over 700 muscles named in your body. All of these muscles together make up about 50% of your total body weight. Typically, these muscles work in groups to create movement for your body, and we name these muscles based on their location, their shape, and their size. But the structure of a skeletal muscle follows like a hierarchy of organization. So the skeletal muscle is going to attach to a bone by a tendon. So here's our bone. We've got the tendon coming off of the bone, which connects to the muscle. So notice that first layer here, we're just calling generally the muscle. But then that muscle can be further broken down into subunits called fascicles. So fascicles is a subunit of a muscle. But then a fascicle can be broken down further into muscle fibers. So a bunch of muscle fibers grouped together would create a fascicle. And then muscle fibers can be further broken down into myofibrils. Okay, so the muscle fiber is technically that layer that we would consider the basic cell of a muscle tissue. So this is the first cellular unit. So if we go even deeper or more detailed, the next layer, then those myofibrils would be considered organelles because we find organelles inside of cells. And then the myofibrils are going to have sarcomeres. This is where we find the sarcomeres, which is the actual functional contractile unit of muscle. Here is where we would actually see muscle contraction occur at that sarcomere level. So on sarcomeres, we'll break it down in the next slide here, but generally speaking, muscles are going to shorten and contract to create your movement. So what's really causing the muscles to shorten and contract is the movement of actin and myosin, which we find inside of a sarcomere. So believe it or not, there's another level or another layer of detail here beyond the sarcomere. And it's these two structures called actin and myosin. And when these actin and myosin contract and overlap versus when they're relaxed, that's what allows us to experience muscle contraction or muscle relaxation. So I'm going to go ahead and click that next slide so we can break that down and see that with some visuals. So many nerves and muscle fibers will work together for muscles to move. All of this is fueled by ATP, or energy coming from cellular respiration. And the movement occurs when myosin and actin bind together and slide past one another. So looking at our visuals, we've got the relaxed phase and we've got the contracted phase. And I've got some color coding going on to help you distinguish what's happening and what is what. So the red is going to refer to the myosin thick filaments, whereas the actin is blue, and these are the thin filaments. Notice in the relaxed phase where each one is located in reference to each other. When things are relaxed, the actin thin filaments are on the outer parts of myosin. They're not overlapped. Actin is on the outside compared to the myosin, not overlapped during relaxation. But as soon as it receives a signal and that muscle needs to contract to create movement, what happens is actin slides over top the myosin. So now the actin and myosin are overlapped, and this causes the entire muscle tissue to tighten. You can see that visually, how they kind of squeeze over top of one another. It tightens up. That's what causes, at the cellular level, the actual muscle contraction. And again, this is very simply stated, very generalized. If you want more detail on these things, check out our on-demand videos. All right, when actin and myosin are overlapped, muscles are, is it degraded, contracted, relaxed, or not working properly? I'll give you 1 minute to think this one out. All right, I'm seeing plenty of accurate answers from you all. So when actin and myosin are overlapped, that means muscles are contracted. All right, when actin and myosin are overlapped on top of each other, that means that the muscle is contracting, it's tightening up. So let's talk about why the other ones are not correct. Option A, degraded. Muscles go through periods of relaxation and contraction when they are healthy. So when actin and myosin are overlapped, that means contraction. That's not when muscles are degraded. In fact, I would say if muscles are degraded, actin and myosin probably are not overlapping as they should or as often as they should. So this is a very healthy process, not something that muscles experience just when they're degraded. Option C, relaxed, is when actin and myosin are not overlapped, so we can rule option C out. And then D, not working properly. Again, actin and myosin overlapping, that a very proper function. That's something that we would expect to happen in the muscle system, so that is a proper function that we would expect to see. All right, your muscles, you've got over 700 of them that are named, and we name those muscles based on location, size, and shape. Muscles generate movement by contracting and shortening. You've got 3 muscle types in your body: cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, and skeletal muscle. There's multiple levels of organization, or I also called it a hierarchy, when it comes to understanding muscle tissues. They are muscles, then muscle fascicles, followed by muscle fibers, myofibrils, and then the basic unit, which is the sarcomere, which is found inside the basic unit of those myofibrils. But remember, on a sarcomere, that sarcomere is going to be the actual part, that actual level that is in charge of the physical muscle contraction itself. And the sarcomere is made up of the filaments called actin and myosin in order to carry out that muscle contraction. All right, we're moving into the reproductive systems. Let's go ahead and start with just the general function of both male and female. So for female reproductive systems, this is more numerous compared to males. So a female's reproductive system's job is to create eggs, fertilize that egg, implant that egg, go through a period of gestation to develop that egg into an embryo and then into a fetus until ultimately we're ready to birth that fetus. And males' reproductive system function is to create sperm and deliver sperm to the female egg in order to get that egg fertilized. Okay, within the function of reproductive systems for male and female, you will have external anatomy and you will have internal anatomy. Let's go ahead and begin with female external anatomy. So the external features that are listed here are general, okay? Remember, all of this is very surface level. So there are two major lip features when it comes to female external anatomy. The one is called labia majora, and you hear the word major. So this is referring to the larger set of lips. These are the outermost folds on a female patient. And the outermost folds, or the labia majora, is to protect all internal structures. But then you also have the labia minora, minor, meaning smaller lips. And the smaller lips here, the labia minora, they encircle the clitoris, creating a hood that extends downward, which also protects the urethra and the opening to the vagina. The clitoris is homologous, actually. It's I don't want to say similar because that's very general, but I'm truly homologous. It's homologous to the penis in males. So the clitoris has a ton of different nerve endings that are there, and this is a similar structure that goes on to develop the penis in utero for males. The urethra is the extension of a tube coming from the bladder to the outside of the female. This is where the female would excrete their urine. So it connects from the bladder to the outermost part of the female so they can excrete their liquid waste. And then the vaginal opening is for sexual intercourse, but then also for childbirth. Let's move on to male external anatomy. Males, the penis is an organ for sexual intercourse. Okay, so this is the external structure that will deliver the sperm from the male to the female. And within that penis, you have a tube called the urethra. And I consider this still an external structure because it opens to the outermost part of the male. But the urethra here in the male has the same exact function as the urethra in the female. The urethra connects to the male's bladder, and it is a tube that opens. It is the opening for urine, but then also for sperm to exit the body. Okay, so the urethra is shared between males and females. It excretes urine, but in males, you're also going to use the urethra to allow for sperm to exit the body as well. The third and final structure externally for males is the scrotum. This structure is going to hold the testicles, and this is going to be situated behind the penis. And the scrotum contains nerves and blood vessels, because as we talk more about the testicles and what's housed inside of the testicles, you definitely need nerve supply for communication, and you need blood supply there for gas exchange and nutrients. Okay, moving internally then for male or for female first, then we'll do male. So internally for the female, let's start with ovaries. Ovaries, there should be two, okay, on the patient's right and on the patient's left. Ovaries are where the eggs are produced. Connecting to the ovaries then is a set of tubes called the fallopian tubes. The fallopian tubes will take the egg that was made by the ovary, and it will deliver that egg down to our next structure called the uterus. The uterus is also known as the womb, and this is where the baby grows and develops. Working our way inferior to the uterus is the cervix. The cervix maintains and protects baby that is in uterus. But then it's also the channel that the baby will pass through, okay? That cervix will open up to the vagina, which allows the baby to pass through that vagina to that external environment for baby to be born. And I should mention, All of these structures and their functions are completely controlled or regulated by hormones, okay? Same thing for males. All of these next set of structures and their functions are going to be regulated by hormones like testosterone in males, for example. Okay, the male reproductive system structures. Let's start with your seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicles are going to make and store fluid, and that fluid is mostly sugar. It's food. Food for the sperm. So the seminal vesicles makes the food for the sperm. Working our way to the next structure here, situated by the seminal vesicles, is your prostate. I say your, I mean males specifically when I say your, of course. The male prostate adds fluid to help nourish that sperm. So beyond just the sugar fluid that's there, it will add even more fluid to help nourish that sperm. Next up is the vas deferens. The vas deferens, as you look at these structures, is a tube. Okay, the vas deferens is a tube that the sperm travels through when it leaves the epididymis here found inside of the testicle, and that sperm eventually has to go to the urethra. So to get from the epididymis to the urethra, it has to travel through the vas deferens. And then the vas deferens, as we said, connect to the epididymis, which is inside of the testicle. So the testicle, this is the main reproductive organ, males. Your testicles are going to make the hormone testosterone, but it will also make your sperm. So since this is the structure that makes the sperm, this is that primary reproductive organ for males. But then in that testicle, we see the epididymis. And the epididymis is a tube towards the back of the testicle, and it holds that sperm. Okay, so this is specifically where those sperm will be found inside of that testicle, and it aids in sperm development. Again, all regulated by hormones. Let's check in for a moment. Question 1. If the fallopian tubes are tied during a tubal ligation, what function does the patient lose? Question 2. Which of the following reproductive structures do men and women both share? 2 questions, you know the drill. That means 2 minutes. I'll check back in with you in 2 minutes. Okay, if the fallopian tubes are tied during a tubal ligation, what function does the patient lose? So first, as we talk or work our way through this question, identify fallopian tubes. Fallopian tubes are found only in females. And the fallopian tubes are going to connect the ovary to the uterus. Okay, so if the fallopian tubes are tied during a procedure called the tubal ligation, that means the patient will lose the ability to deliver eggs to the uterus. which means also that those eggs may not be fertilized. So option C is the correct answer here. Tubal ligation is also known as getting your tubes tied. So those tubes, remember, deliver eggs to the uterus. So if we cut those off, if we tie those off, if we sever those off, eggs will not be delivered to the uterus, and possibly sperm not be able to even get to that egg in order to fertilize it. So option A, the uterus cannot contract for labor. This is not correct. The fallopian tubes do not control muscle contractions for the uterus to even control labor. So we can rule that one out. Option B, eggs are not produced, is also incorrect. That is the job of the ovary. And we're not doing anything to the ovary. We're just cutting off the tube that connects to the ovary. Option D, sperm are not able to leave the epididymis. We can rule that one out quickly because this is a male-only trait, or feature, I should say, feature. And so we're talking about fallopian tubes, which is specific to the females, so we can rule option D out. So for those who chose option C, which I think was nearly, everybody actually, you guys got that one spot on. Question 2, which of the following reproductive structures do men and women share? The correct answer here is the urethra. Remember, the urethra is the tube that connects from the bladder to the outermost part of the patient's body. It allows for that urine to be released from the body. Men and women both have a urethra. Seminal vesicles are unique to males only. Option B, cervix, is unique to females only. And option D, labias are unique to females only. Option C here, urethra, is the only correct choice. Okay, when it comes to the reproductive system, we said that the main function here is to, between males and females both, fertilize an egg. So we've got sperm from the males that need to fertilize the eggs from the females. And when that happens, when sperm successfully fertilize an egg, we immediately call that structure now a zygote. And that zygote is going to be found in the fallopian tube, because here is where the egg is sitting, and that's eventually where the sperm will travel to. And if there are no tubal ligation procedures happening, then that means the sperm are able to reach that egg successfully. So we've got a zygote that's been created, and it will immediately undergo many cell divisions. We call that mitosis. That's just the sciencey term for cell divisions. But that zygote begins undergoing many, many cell divisions very quickly. And then that zygote structure will implant into the uterus. And eventually over time, that becomes an embryo. And then as that continues to undergo more cell divisions and develop, that embryo becomes a fetus. And about 40 weeks, the fetus has it's fully grown, it's developed, it's come to its full term. We call that period the gestation period, that full 40-week growth and development. And once it's reached that period, eventually baby needs to be born. And so that's the birth stage. The uterus here in the female will contract, and baby is pushed out of the uterus through the cervix and out through the vagina into the world. I do want to mention, if fertilization is not successful, okay, and we could talk forever about all the different reasons for why that can happen, but if the egg goes unfertilized, the female's body recognizes this, and it sheds the innermost lining of the uterus along with that unfertilized egg. And this is a part of that menstrual cycle that females experience once a month, I should say. If they have a regular cycle, all females are very different, okay? But typically they experience menstruation about once a month. And again, that is the female's body shedding that uterine lining and that unfertilized egg. So let's quickly review the reproductive structures and systems. The reproductive system is all regulated by hormones. Male reproductive system's purpose is to create sperm and to deliver sperm to the egg. Females, their purpose is to create eggs, which can be fertilized. If an egg is not fertilized, or if that egg is not properly implanted, the uterine lining is shed, and that's part of that menstrual cycle. If a fertilized egg is implanted, the cell undergoes many cell divisions as it continues to grow and develop into a fetus in the woman's uterus until it's grown and fully developed enough to be born. Okay, moving into the integumentary system. This one is a rather quick section too, by the way. The integumentary system is the largest organ, actually, in your body, and it plays a vital role in protecting yourself. It also plays a role in excretion and maintaining homeostasis with any environment that you're interacting with. The integumentary system consists of skin, hair, nails, and glands. But the skin, there's a little more detail I want to give you on this one. There's 3 layers that make up your skin. You can see them here in the visual. There's the epidermis, so that prefix epi means surface, above, epi, outermost. Followed then by the dermis. Notice how this is the largest section out of all 3 layers. Here in the dermis, you will find hair follicles, sweat glands, and blood vessels. And then below the dermis is the hypodermis, hence why it's called hypo. Hypo means below. And here you're going to find more glands and blood. Why? To excrete, to maintain homeostasis, to perform all those functions that we mentioned on the previous slide. So let's break each one of those functions down into more detail. The integumentary system will help to protect you because this is your body's first line of defense. We'll talk about that in our immune system, but it's the first barrier from pathogens. The integumentary system will protect your body through moisturizing. It is waterproof due to all of these old cells being pushed to the surface. It creates this waterproof barrier. Your integumentary system is made up of melanocytes. So these are cells that contain melanin. Melanin, its job is to protect your DNA, specifically inside of your cells, from UV. UV that can damage your DNA, which can eventually lead to cancer, for example. So melanocytes are a specific type of cell found within the integumentary system that will protect your body from UV. And then finally, don't forget about nails. That's that outermost part too that will also serve as protection. Protection at the tips of your fingers and your toes specifically. But another role is to excrete. Okay, so your body has to be able to excrete water, sodium, chlorine, magnesium, and sweat in order to maintain homeostasis for a whole bunch of different reasons. We could go on and on about all the different reasons, but just kind of keep note of the different types of major excretions here. And finally, the integumentary system is a major player when it comes to maintaining homeostasis with the environment. So there are sensory nerve endings in your dermis, okay, and that allows the body to detect pain. It allows your body to detect touch and to sense temperature within its environment. So if it senses a really hot temperature, that tells your body to dilate its vessels and to begin sweating. It helps to maintain an internal temperature, no matter the environment that you're existing in. And on the flip side, if you're in a really cold environment, that's telling your body to shiver, to constrict its vessels, to conserve heat, conserve energy so that you can survive the cold environment that you are in. But also, your skin is going to produce vitamin D and also that melanin component, like I said, in response to the UV radiation in the environment. All right, a quick check-in on your learning about the integumentary system. It plays a vital role in which of the following? Select all that apply. Does the integumentary system play a vital role in movement, protection, maintaining homeostasis, or excretion? Select all that apply. I'll give you 1 minute to think this one through. All right, everybody. When it says select all that apply, that's typically a good hint that there's more than one that apply to the question, and I see a lot of you picked up on that. So the correct answer here for the integumentary system playing a vital role in which of the following? It plays a vital role in protecting, maintaining homeostasis, and excretion. Okay, so movement is going to be the vital role of your muscles and your muscles connecting to your bones. And that's not a part of the integumentary system. We could also say, your nervous system has a big role in that too, sending signals for movement. But none of these apply, or none of the movement aspects apply to the integumentary system. Okay, someone asked in the chat to explain choice D. I sure can. So remember excretion. When we talked about the different layers of the integumentary system, we said that there are glands in the integumentary system. These glands are going to allow you to excrete different substances like water, sweat, salts, magnesium, chlorine, all of those items. So because those glands, which excrete all of those components, are a part of the integumentary system, specifically found in the dermal layer of the integumentary system, that's a vital role. Vital meaning that your life depends on that. If you are not excreting those waste products, that means that those waste products are instead building up inside of your body, which can throw all of your levels off, generally speaking, which then throws homeostasis off. So if excretion's not being maintained, option D, that would then also affect option C, throwing your body out of homeostasis. Okay, reviewing integumentary system. It consists of your hair, your skin, your nails, and glands. The integumentary system serves to protect you, serves to excrete waste, and to maintain homeostasis. It protects from pathogens, it moisturizes, it consists of nails to protect the ends of your fingers and your toes. It excretes specifically water, salts, and those other electrolytes. And it maintains homeostasis with the environment by regulating temperature and producing vitamin D and melanin. Let's move on to the endocrine system. I just want to be fair to your guys' time. It is officially 8 o'clock. I'm going to keep on finishing this webinar tonight. So if you're able to stay, please do. We'll wrap this one up here in no time. It'll be beneficial to your learning, I promise. But if you do have to go, I completely understand that too. Just don't forget, please, to fill out that feedback survey and to check out what else we have to offer for you as a pre-nursing student who's ready to take their TEAS. So check us out over at Archer Review, please. Okay, moving on to, oh, hold on a second. I see something in the chat. I do have a PDF for these notes. I sent it out at the start, like in our chat here. I sent it out at the start of the webinar, but I will absolutely send it back into the webinar at the end of this webinar as well. So I'll send it back into the chat at the end of this webinar. So if you don't have it and you're able to stick around with us, hang in there. I'll get you these notes before we take off tonight. All right, endocrine system. Here we go, guys. All right, the endocrine system's function is to regulate body functions by controlling all of your hormones. The endocrine system, you guys, it's vast. There's a lot of structures involved here. They control so many functions in the body, all through hormones. So the body systems that are regulated by the endocrine system, to some capacity. Here we go. Your stress and your response to injury, regulated by the endocrine system. Blood production, sexual development, reproduction, growth, even your appetite, guys, all controlled by the endocrine system to some capacity. Your electrolyte balance, your brain function, and even your sleep cycles. So as you see from this list here, the functions are diverse and they're numerous, which means that the structures we're going to talk about are diverse and they are numerous, but we're just going to be very general about it for right now. So the glands and organs release hormones directly into the circulatory system, which will influence functions such as growth, metabolism, and your mood. And the structures involved here in that whole list that we talked about are the pancreas, the gonads, which is a science term for the reproductive organs like the ovaries and the testes, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, adrenal glands, thymus, the thyroid gland, and the parathyroid. We'll break each one down in just a little bit more detail. So the pancreas is going to be found near the stomach, and its job is to regulate blood sugar through producing like insulin, for example, a hormone that's going to help regulate your blood sugar. The gonads, whether they be ovaries or the testes, are going to produce hormones like estrogen and progesterone and testosterone. These hormones are going to regulate reproduction and sexual development. Okay. So I'm just checking the chat here. Someone joined late and was asking about Archer Review. I'll give you more information at the end just about what Archer Review is able to offer all of you beyond just our free webinars, okay? So if you're able to stick around for the after discussion for just a minute or two, I'll answer all of your questions. All right, moving on with more structures in the endocrine system. The pituitary gland, also known as the master gland, you guys. This controls other endocrine glands. So the pituitary gland, notice this little guy. It's situated towards the innermost part of your cranium, so it's very protected. But notice this gland and how small it is. This pituitary gland is known as the master gland because it controls the other endocrine glands, and it regulates your growth and your development. So just to be a little bit more specific, it's located behind your nose and at the base of your brain. Nearby is the pineal gland. The pineal gland is situated deep into the brain and it produces melatonin. Melatonin is the hormone that's going to be involved in your sleep cycles. And the hypothalamus is situated nearby the pituitary gland. The hypothalamus actually regulates all internal balance like your temperature, your thirst, your hunger, your sleep, but the hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary gland. So the hypothalamus is a specific part of the brain. The pituitary gland is a specific gland. This is the master gland, but the hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary or the master gland. The adrenal gland is situated on top of the kidneys, and it makes cortisol or adrenaline, which helps you respond to that stress or injury experience. The thymus is situated above the heart. The thymus is going to make T cells, which are necessary for the immune system, which we get to talk about in an upcoming section of this webinar. The thyroid gland is located in the neck, and it's going to regulate your metabolism, your energy levels, and your calcium levels. And the parathyroid glands, which are situated nearby to the thyroid, they're located behind the thyroid. This is going to specifically regulate calcium in the blood. So the thyroid regulates calcium levels, generally speaking. But the parathyroid gland is going to regulate calcium in your blood. So I know those structures are numerous, guys. They're diverse and they've got a whole lot of functions. But let's do a quick check-in and see what you're able to process. So question 1, which of the following endocrine glands controls body temperature, internal balance, thirst, hunger, sleep, etc.? And question 2, if someone is diagnosed with type 1 or type 2 diabetes, which endocrine gland is not functioning correctly? 2 questions means 2 minutes. Go ahead and begin. All right, 2 minutes just wrapped up. I'm watching that clock real closely to make sure that we're utilizing our time most efficiently. So 2 minutes is up and we're starting right away. Question 1, which of the following endocrine glands controls body temperature, internal balance, thirst, hunger, sleep? The options here are numerous. That would be the job of the hypothalamus. Option C, the hypothalamus regulates all internal balances. Okay, option A, the pineal gland, we said produces melatonin that's involved with your sleep. Option B, thyroid regulates metabolism. And then option D is specifically helping you to respond to stress by regulating cortisol and adrenaline. So the only option out of all of these that is pretty diverse is that hypothalamus option. Question 2, if someone is diagnosed by type 1 or type 2 diabetes, which endocrine organ is not functioning correctly? And that's the job of A, your pancreas. Remember, that's situated near your stomach, and it will regulate things like insulin to help take in glucose levels. This is going to regulate blood sugars. So if your body is not able to regulate blood sugar correctly, you are either diagnosed with type 1 or type 2, depending on the genetic component and depending on lifestyle choices there. Option B, pineal gland, like we said, is going to produce melatonin. That's involved in sleep, not involved with blood sugar levels. Option C, parathyroid glands. Parathyroid regulates calcium in the blood, but not glucose in the blood, which is what type 1 and type 2 are connected to. And then option D, the gonads regulate sexual development and reproduction through ovaries and testes, also not involved in type 1 or type 2 diabetes. But all of these glands or structures working together to maintain balance are all going to play a role in the cycle or the feedback mechanisms that maintain homeostasis. So homeostasis is maintaining that internal balance that we just talked about. And it does so through a series of steps. So first of all, your body's going to have receptors or sensors, whether that's on the neuron or receptors on other cell types. And these sensors or receptors simply just detect a change in the body. That change is then sent to the control center, where your brain or the endocrine glands will detect or process that signal. Sorry, they don't detect, but they receive that incoming signal, and they determine how to properly respond. So they'll send that signal to the proper part of the body in order to carry out that response, in order to restore balance, get back into homeostasis. And so there are a couple of different feedback loops that help to maintain homeostasis. A negative feedback loop is either going to decrease or increase your levels to restore homeostasis. Whereas a positive feedback loop is specifically going to amplify a response, and it's actually driving your body away from homeostasis. Is it necessary at that moment in time? Yes. For example, when a woman's body is giving birth, all right, there are hormones that are being released that tell the cervix to expand, and it tells the uterus to contract in order to get that baby out. Is that the normal day-to-day balance of a female's body? Not at all, but it's necessary in that moment in time in order to carry out that function, which is birth that baby. So a positive feedback loop amplifies a response that's needed at that moment in time, but it is driving it away from the normal. And after that positive feedback loop is done, the negative feedback loop kicks in, and it will decrease those levels once more to bring that body back into its normal state. Okay, moving into the we should recap endocrine before we get into urinary. I was really excited to jump to the next one. The endocrine system regulates all bodily functions to some capacity. The pituitary gland is the master gland that regulates all the actions of the endocrine glands. But remember, the pituitary gland is controlled by the hypothalamus in the brain. And all of these glands, all of these structures together regulate hormones, which helps to maintain homeostasis or that internal balance for your body. Okay, now moving into the urinary system. The urinary system is going to maintain homeostasis by excreting specifically water, salts, and other waste. Okay, so not to be confused with excretion in the integumentary system, where we excrete some of these same items, but through our glands and our skin. Okay, these excrements are going to be excreted through the urinary system through filtration. So the structures involved in the urinary system are the kidneys. The kidneys are going to maintain balance, stability of fluid. It's going to filter waste in your blood. The kidneys make vitamin D that's active. And the kidneys are found in the dorsal part of your lower back. So think your backside, lower back region. That's where you would find your kidneys. So any patient that's experiencing kidney disease and pain there would feel that in their lower back region. Another structure that connects to the kidneys, and it's also in your urinary system, is the ureter. The ureter, again, connects to the kidneys. It transports the urine, the stuff that was just filtered, from the kidney down to the bladder. And see how you've got two ureters because you've got two kidneys. The bladder holds all of your fluid waste. And then connecting to the bladder is your urethra. We talked about this in the reproductive system. The urethra is a tube that connects the bladder to the outside of the body. And when we're talking just urinary system, the urethra is going to transport urine. All right, since Your urinary system's one of its main roles here is to filter and to excrete waste. In your kidneys, the structure that's a major player for filtering, I want to talk about the basic component of a kidney, which is a nephron. Nephrons are a system of tubules. And these tubules will actually maintain pressure, and it uses that pressure to help with that filtration. So since the tubules are enclosed and they contain fluid, that's what allows for there to be pressure present. And again, having and maintaining and using that pressure allows for the nephron to remove waste like salts, ammonia, urea, glucose, etc. These are just some of the things that are going to be removed and filtered out. And it also allows for water to be reabsorbed along with some nutrients. And then whatever is left over goes down to the ureters to be excreted out of the body. So what is the name of the tube that connects the kidneys to the urinary bladder? Is it the fallopian tube, the vas deferens, the ureter, or the urethra? I'll give you 1 minute to share your response. The tube that connects the kidneys to the urinary bladder is the ureter, guys. So option C, and I think, nearly everybody chose option C. Good job. The ureter is going to connect the kidney to the urinary bladder. It facilitates the flow of urine. All right, so from the kidney to the bladder for temporary storage until you have control of releasing that urine. So option A, the fallopian tube, remember this is a part of the reproductive system. This is the tube that connects the ovary to the uterus. So it is a tube, but it's not a tube in the urinary system, just the female reproductive system. Vas deferens, kind of the same explanation here. It's male specific. The vas deferens is another tube here, and it's not a part of the urinary system, but it does transport the sperm from the epididymis to that ureter, or the urethra, to the urethra, so that sperm can be excreted from the body. So it is a tube, but it's just specific to males, and it's for the reproductive system only. Option D, the urethra, is incorrect. The urethra is the conduit through which your urine is expelled from the bladder to the outside of your body, but it's not the tube that connects the kidneys to your bladder. That is the ureter. All right, the urinary system is for excreting waste and maintaining fluid concentration and pressure to maintain homeostasis in the body. It's made up of the kidneys, ureters, your bladder, and your urethra. Kidneys are made up of millions of nephrons, which are a system of tiny tubules for filtering the blood, and all those filtrates leave the body through the urine. All right, our second to last concept. Guys, thanks for hanging out a little extra with me tonight. I know we're past that 8 o'clock time. If you got to leave whenever you need to, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to share these notes again in the chat at the end. And I'll also talk about what else Archer has to offer you guys with a bunch of QR codes to get you hooked up with all of the things that you need. So we'll get there. It'll be just a little bit, but let's move on to the immune system next. The immune system, think of it like a defense army for your body. It's got multiple lines of defense that protects your body from bacteria, from viruses, and other pathogens. The first line of defense would be considered an innate defense. It's the first immediate protection through any kind of like physical or chemical barriers. For example, your skin, we talked about that in the integumentary system. So your skin, but also think of like tears, stomach acid, saliva, all of those are going to have some of those chemical barriers too. But it's that first line of defense, and it's considered innate. It's something you're born with. The second line of defense, also innate, is your immune cells, inflammation, and fever. Again, all of these things that you are born with, but if something gets past your skin, for example, then it might come into contact with your immune cells, or it would trigger your body to say something's off here, and it becomes inflamed. It causes a fever. So that's the second line of defense, but it's still innate. It's natural. It's immediate. The third line of defense we would consider adaptive. It's a very specific type of defense, the third line of defense, but it's long-lasting protection. And it gets this through activating B and T cells. And it produces antibodies and develops this immune memory. This is why it's long-lasting, because it has a memory. It can remember what it encountered and it can fight it off once more. But it is adaptive. Meaning it's not something that you're just initially something that you're born with. It's something that you accumulate through exposure over time. I want to talk more about those B and T cells in that third line of adaptive immunity. The B cells are going to be comprised of those lymphocytes. So the lymphocytes are produced by your lymph nodes. And it produces antibodies when it encounters a specific antigen. So this is a substance that triggers an immune response. So your body will produce antibodies when it comes into contact with an antigen, something that will trigger this immune response. Antibodies will mark that pathogen for destruction by other cells. So that whole job is the job of B cells. This is adaptive immunity, something that you acquire over time. There's also the help of T cells. And T cells, they're numerous. One type of T cell is a helper T cell. Helper T cells help activate the B cells. That's pretty easy and straightforward. Creative name there, helper T cells. You have cytotoxic T cells. Cytotoxic T cells recognize antigens and induce cell death. Memory T cells remain in your body, and it allows for an effective response should you ever come into that pathogen again. This is what allows for that memory mechanism. This is what allows for there to be a long-term response. But again, it's adaptive. It's something that you have to come into contact with. It's something you have to encounter in order to gain those memory cells. It's not something that you're just born with. It is instead adaptive immunity. The immune system gains adaptive immunity for the body through two different ways. That's either through passive immunity or active immunity. So again, we're focusing on adaptive immunity only right now, that third line of defense. But you can get adaptive immunity in two different ways, passive or active. Let's distinguish between the two. Passive immunity involves the transfer of antibodies from an outside source. I've bolded this because this is key to helping you understand. Passive immunity comes from an outside source. The immunity is immediate, but it is short term. So some examples to help us process this. Maternal antibodies. This is a natural method. Okay, but you're only able to get maternal antibodies when you are in utero, when you've not been born yet. So mother's antibodies will be transferred to you. So her body is an outside source from yours, but it is transferred to your body when you are in utero. But it's immediate and short term. Okay, those antibodies you get from mom do not last forever. It's short term. In fact, so just to help you understand that process a little bit better, I am actually currently pregnant. I'm about 34 weeks along right now, and I just got the RSV vaccine so that my body could use the immune system to create antibodies for RSV. And because I'm able to create antibodies for RSV, my body can transfer those antibodies to baby because baby will be born here in the middle of February. And that's peak RSV season. And I just don't want to take that risk of my baby contracting RSV, or I want them to have a better chance of being able to fight that off. So baby is getting passive immunity through gaining antibodies from me, an outside source, but they're not going to be protected from RSV forever because of those antibodies that are being delivered from me. Okay, so it's just a temporary, it's short term, but beneficial. Another way you can get passive immunity is through antibody injections. Okay, so this is how I got the RSV vaccination, of course, an antibody injection. But another example could be like a snake bite treatment. So you're out in a hike, you get bit by a snake, and you quickly get an antibody injection. You're giving your body the antibodies to fight off the antigen from the snake bite. So passive immunity. Active immunity. So this involves the stimulation of one's immune system to produce its own antibodies and memory cells. The immunity is long lasting. So this is going to be either acquired naturally through an infection. Okay, so you naturally become infected with something. Your body has an active immunity all on its own, not from an outside source, but all on its own. It can produce its own antibodies. Or, like I said, through vaccinations, which is more of an artificial method, but it's still allowing your body, or my body right now with those vaccines, to make its own antibodies. Oh, too fast here. All right, so let's go ahead and distinguish between innate and adaptive immunity. So read through those four choices. You've got 1 minute. How do we distinguish between innate and adaptive? What's that difference? Thank you to those who told me you can't hear. Here I am going on about why this is correct and not correct, and my unmute didn't quite stick there. So thank you so much for giving me that feedback. I'll go ahead and start over. So distinguishing between innate and adaptive immunity. Obviously, you see the option here, B is correct. Adaptive immunity involves memory cells. Innate immunity does not. So let's just quickly run through while the others are incorrect. Innate immunity for option A says that it's specific to particular pathogens, while adaptive immunity provides general defense. The opposite is true here. So innate immunity is general. Remember, innate is automatic. It's something you're born with. It's just general, though. It's not something that's really specific. Getting specific immunity is something that you have to acquire over time, which is adaptive immunity. Option C, innate immunity develops over time, while adaptive immunity is present from birth. Again, and again through our explanation for A, the opposite is true. Innate immunity is something that you are born with. Adaptive immunity is something that you have to develop or acquire over time. And then option D, adaptive immunity includes physical barriers like skin, while innate immunity involves antibodies. Your innate immunity is going to include physical barriers like skin. That's a part of something that you're just born with. It's that first line of defense. That's innate. Whereas adaptive immunity, that's the antibody piece that you can either acquire naturally or artificially, and it's acquired over time. All right, we're reviewing the immune system. The immune system is the person's defense mechanism. Remember, there's multiple lines of defense. The innate immune system is going to be made up of your first and second line of defense, which is mostly physical and chemical barriers, followed by fevers, inflammation, and some immune cells that are activated. Whereas adaptive immunity is that third line of defense, and here is where we depend on the roles of B and T cells. An individual can gain immunity either through passive means, meaning an outside source, but it's short term, or it can gain immunity through active immunity, producing antibodies, which is going to be long term. All right, we've gone through this fast, but we are on our last topic for this anatomy and physiology crash course tonight. So again, thanks for hanging out a little extra beyond 8 o'clock tonight. The skeletal system. Let's go ahead and get started and wrap this up. Our skeletal system is going to be made up of 4 different types of bones. Long bones, short bones, flat bones, irregular bones. And long bones are considered long because they're longer than they are wide. And because of that structure, they provide the function of support. Short bones are going to have kind of that same length as width, so think more like squatty bones. Flat bones are thin and they're flat. Think like your sternum or your scapula, your shoulder blade, your breastbone. They're flat, they protect vital organs. And irregular bones, these are things that just don't really fit into anything else. Think like your vertebrae, for example, definitely an irregular shape. When we look at the skeletal tissue under a microscope, so what allows for the bones to have the general functions of support and protection, it comes down to what it looks like under the microscope. And what you see here is kind of fascinating, and it's very dense. So we see first osteons. So these osteons, I wish this visual was a little bit more blown up for you, but maybe you can zoom in on your screen. I can't on mine because I'm presenting, but if you're able to zoom in on yours, I want you to zoom in on like the outermost circular unit. See how there's a bunch of circular units side by side by side, and in each circular unit are rings. Okay, I want you to look at just one major circular unit, and this is what we call an osteon. An osteon has it's just tiny packed cylinders, and this is the functional unit for a bone. But because it's tiny, because it's packed, because it's dense, this is what allows for your bone to provide support. Now, within osteons, you have lamella. Lamella are these ring structures, and this is going to house osteons. Oh wait. Okay. Sorry, not house osteons. I kind of worded that poorly, but it's going to be comprised of or help make up your osteons. That's what I should say. Moving on to the lacunae. The lacunae are going to be a little bit harder to see in this visual, but they're these darkened, cave-like, dark-colored pits. They're found on the lamella. But the lacunae, this is the spaces where osteocytes are going to be located. And osteo means bone or skeletal, okay? And then the site is going to mean cell. So the osteocytes are bone cells. So in all of these pits, these cave-like structures, here is where you will find bone cells developing. That's what osteocytes are. But then in the middle of every osteon is a Haversian canal. And then a Haversian canal has 3 different structures found in that canal. You've got blood, a blood vessel, so you've got an artery and you've got a vein, and you've also got nerves. Also that the nutrients can be transported and waste can also be removed and transported. Okay, bone formation or bone homeostasis is maintained by specific osteocytes and their ratio. So osteocytes, we learned, are bone cells, but specifically osteocytes can go on to become osteoblasts or osteoclasts. And depending on what your body needs at different times, sometimes you're forming bone, sometimes you're degrading bone. When we want to build bone up, form it, you're growing, you're developing, you would have more osteoblasts than you would osteoclasts. Osteoblasts are bone building cells that help with growth and repair. So I just remember blast, build. So the B's go together. Osteoblast is building. Whereas osteoclasts, these are bone destroying, bone degrading. So if you have a broken bone, your body senses it, it begins to break down and destroy those broken components, and it would then activate more osteoblasts to help repair and build it back up. Bone joints are where bone is going to unite with bone. So bone is going to butt up with another bone. This is not to be confused with ligaments where bone attaches to another. Oftentimes my students have a hard time distinguishing between the two, so I just want to make sure that we reference both. A bone joint is where bone unites with bone. It's next to it, not attached, but it's an area where one bone butts up to, and it's next to another one. Ligaments are going to actually physically attach from one bone to another bone. Some joints where bone meets up with bone, some joints are movable, some joints are fixed. So an example of a movable joint is like your ball and socket joint up here, or your hinge joint found in like your elbow. A fixed joint we call like sutures. Think like in your skull. So you've got different bones situated next to each other, making up your entire skull. You're not able to move those. They are fixed, and for good reason, to protect your brain. So fixed joints versus movable joints. Some are for protection, some are for movement. Oh, shoot. Okay. Well, darn it. We'll talk about it. I thought I had, normally I do a dual slide here. I must have accidentally deleted it. We'll just talk it through for a minute. Bone building is done by osteoblasts, whereas bone degrading is done by osteoclasts. Okay, so just wanted to help you distinguish between osteoblast, bone building, osteoclast, bone degrading. So sorry, I kind of messed that one up for you guys. That's okay. We'll move on. And finally, with the skeletal system, bones are connected to muscles to allow for movement. So muscles connect to bones, remember, via tendons. We talked about that in the muscular system. So muscle connects to bones via tendons, and because of this partnership, you are able to experience movement. But what controls the muscles that connects to the bones to allow for movement? And of course, that's your nervous system. So your nervous system is going to send signals to your muscles to get those actin and myosins to overlap and contract, which then pulls on the muscle, which pulls on the bone. So these three systems work in unison to create movement for your overall system. Okay, let's review quick. There are 4 types of bone: long, short, flat, and irregular. Compact bone is made up of many osteons, which contribute to the strength of the bone. Osteoblasts build bone, while osteoclasts destroy bone and reuses those components to maintain your overall bone health. Joints are where bone meets up with bone. Some move, some are not movable. We call those fixed joints. And bones have close relationships with muscles, which allows for movement. All right, guys, we made it. We made it through an A&P crash course tonight. Definitely went over our 8 o'clock time, but I appreciate you so much for hanging in there with me. Some people have asked about, extra information. I got in here late. What about notes? I'm just going to fill you all in, give you all the things you need so you can continue studying and, cater your learning experience towards what you really need. So let's go ahead and talk about all those wonderful features that Archer Review has to offer you. First and foremost, free live webinars. We've got tons of webinars all the time available, not just science. We've got math, we've got reading, we've got language arts. So those are all a part of your TEAS test as well. So please keep an eye out for all of our other free live webinars that you always have access to. Sign up early so you get those confirmation emails. And thank you to those who said, double check if those confirmation emails send out dates and times. I will definitely make sure that that is set up for you. If you missed a webinar, if you showed up late tonight and you want to watch the whole thing, lucky for you, you can do that. So scan this QR code. It will take you to the link on our website where you can have access to all of our previous webinars. Rewatch them at your own pace. Rewatch tonight's if you got in here late. You have access to this. Okay, next up, our free question bank. Don't forget, for a limited time, you get access to over 1,500 questions. Okay, but if you want unlimited access, don't forget about that SurePass package that I mentioned to you guys and that SurePass Pro package that not only gives you access to our QBank and our on-demand videos, but also an hour tutoring session. And speaking of our on-demand videos, okay, our on-demand videos are going to allow you to go into concepts that you feel like you really need to improve on. And within those concepts, there's still going to be topics that you're really great at and you want to skip. And then you want to go to just the part of the video that you really need to improve on or get more practice questions. Use those timestamp features. It allows you to skip around so that you can, again, make your learning very individualized to your needs. And finally, tutoring. Tutoring, we've got 3 educators available right now for tutoring. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide so that you have a QR code to access each one of those. So Tammy does English and reading. So if you want any kind of support with English and reading, scan Tammy's QR code here to set up an appointment with her. Shelly is another science educator here at Archer Review. She's phenomenal, you guys. I'm not available for tutoring right now, and she's doing all the science tutoring. So utilize her, scan that QR code, sign up for a session with her. She is truly wonderful. You will benefit so much from Shelly. And Brandon's the math genius. So if you need help with any of your math needs, scan Brandon's QR code and sign up with him, another wonderful educator. So you've got three amazing tutors available for you, all who are currently in public education or were in public education. These educators have been teaching for a while, you guys. Utilize them. They're good at what they do. They're here for you. So don't forget that you have an hour available with them if you sign up with that SurePass Pro package, along with the QBank, along with the on-demand videos. And then finally, another QR code, but this is for the feedback survey. So again, we do these free webinars for all of our pre-nursing students, but as an educator, we just appreciate always growing, learning, and improving. So please take this survey. Tell me tonight what went really well for you, what could be improved for you so that we can make the most of our time together to really help you prepare. And as requested, I'll go ahead and head over to the chat and I will send back out the link to tonight's notes because I know some people joined a little late. And if you want access to the notes, sent. So in our Zoom chat right now, I've sent it out to you. Hopefully you're able to access that link just fine. And when I get a moment here, I will also send it out to YouTube and Facebook chat for those students to be able to access too. Okay, someone says share the QR code for the recording of this video, please. Okay, so I'm going to switch my slides here. Okay. Here is the QR code for our live webinars. Probably going to want to go to the rewatch because I'm going to hop off here once everyone gets what they need. And so then it would be considered done and it would be under the rewatch. So scan this QR code right here. I'm afraid if I zoom in, it'll make it a bit blurry for some people. And some people said it appears kind of blurry for them tonight. Could be like your Wi-Fi signal. If it's not clear enough for you on the screen, I would recommend accessing the PDF notes. Okay, that'll take you to a bigger screen with a bigger QR code that hopefully your phone can pick up on. For those of you sharing, you're having issues with it being blurry. So if there's any other questions, feel free to ask. Otherwise, we rocked it tonight. So thank you for being here. I'll hang out for just another minute or two to catch any lingering questions, but I hope this was beneficial to you all. I do a chemistry webinar at the start of next month, February 4th, actually. So put that on your calendars. It'll be my last webinar with you all for a couple of months because I'll be having babies. So you guys will be in great hands with Shelly. Keep an eye out for all the free webinars we offer. Okay, so I'll hang out, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen. That way I can switch on over to my Facebook and YouTube chat and share with those notes over there. Thanks to everybody who wished me congratulations with baby and all the well wishes. I appreciate you all so much. Thank you. All right, everyone, I think I've answered everyone's questions. So I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I hope to catch you at my next chemistry webinar, February 4th. So happy studying and good night to all of you.